beyond expensive and free, in favour of a new alliance with the worker of nature. Looking back on the question of what happened in the 20th century from our present vantage point, it is apparent that in a number of ways this era represents a time of fulfilment. Badiou has rightfully emphasised the extent to which this century broke with the prophetic habits of the previous one. In the century of triumphant impatience, which is capable of anything but waiting a while longer for things to mature gradually in their own time. It is the century of immediate implementation, in which the martial law of taking action replaces patience, delay, and hope. Contra Ernst Bloch, we should now recognise that the 20th century never knew a principle of hope, only ever a principle of immediacy, sofort, which consisted of two cooperating factors, the principle of impatience and the principle of getting something for free, das Prinzip gratis. The unleashing of impatience is one of the social psychological mysteries of the 20th century. Without it, neither the realist excesses of the first half nor the second half's mass cultural forms of recreation can be understood. Epochal impatience dates back to the diffusion of new motorized powers and to the propulsive tendencies of human action. Power can become an omnipresent theme in the 20th century because this was when its technological organs formed their new alliance with available energies. Thus, in order to do justice to yesterday's aspirations for the 20th century as an age of seriousness, we must recognise its resolute actualism and review the reasons why the age of anticipation transitioned to an age of deeds. This cannot be accomplished, as we have already indicated, if we limit our analysis to the span from 1914 to the present. Even to extend our inquiry to motifs dating back to the age of the French Revolution, as we have already done, remains inadequate. The real dynamic of the 20th century cannot be explained merely by the emergence of radicalism, in which new subjects or agents wanted to make themselves into the media of nature or of history to come. Instead, we must return to the era of Renaissance arts and Baroque universal magic, in order to trace there the crucial lines of power whose triumphant manifestation becomes evident in the 20th century. The reference to magic of the early modern era is no accident, since anyone who would like to track present-day culture's dynamic actualism, with its explosiveness, impatience, instant gratification, and smug dissatisfaction, must focus their attention on the crystallization phase of a new mental structure that extends from the 16th into the 21st century. I am referring here to a reversal in which the formulation and formatting of human desire shifts from a religious to a secular object. From the 16th century on, including a few preludes in the 14th and 15th centuries, the summum bonum, which generally shows desire the way, is translated from the striving for resolution into the search for ease, Erleichterung. With this change of emphasis, imminent conditions assume the function of the highest good. This leads to immense interest in so-called natural magic, which initially seems to mean nothing more than providing the human being with a way of escape from the prisons of old necessity. On a deeper level, we should here note that it also leads to the discovery of the first depth psychology, and to a symbolic technique of self-birth. Consequently, human life in the modern age can take on the form of a treasure hunt. Treasure is imagined to be the means for the universal easing of life, and only needs to be found for this to immediately happen. We must once again visualize the paradoxical course of this search. It's hard not to notice an effect that could be called irony. Scarcely had the modern era's magia naturalis taken shape as the epistemological matrix of research into means for the easing of life, before it devolved into an endless task whose enormous difficulties belied the imagined result of the search. And this is obvious from the vast resources that Baroque thought and experimentation invested in so-called alchemy, particularly the art of making gold, today forgotten and considered to be absurd. This branch of alchemy, undoubtedly its most fascinating offshoot, is based on the grandiose pre-capitalist dream in which the quintessence of value or the substance of treasure could be directly produced. If this were true, whoever mastered the production of gold would be able to conduct the treasure hunt as though it were a scientifically controlled manufacturing process. Such an alchemist would be freed from external fortune and would have found the source of wealth. The dominant motif of fairy tales in the modern world here emerges in crystalline purity. From now on, it will always be a matter of working in order to never have to work again. In the new regime, all effort is merely a preliminary character, the meaning of all exertion to be found in striving for effortless homeostasis. We are patient one more time, so that after the great discovery we will never have to be patient again. Europe's deepest dream is the unemployment that results from affluence. I am suggesting that we recognise the realisation, Wahrmachung, of the alchemical dream as the main event of the 20th century. We have seen that it is characteristic of this age's style that realisations cannot occur without bringing the dream's latent horrors to the light of day. The irony of realisation, Verwirklichung, is connected to the irony of the search. From the beginning, the search for wealth was unmistakably inherent in the conflation of working and searching. As soon as the search itself took on the form of organised work, it also transformed the concept of wealth as such. And from the figure of treasure, there gradually emerged that of capital, which tested the acuity of economists as well as critics of political economy from the late 18th century onwards. The treasure hunt became less meaningful as economists increasingly took over the topic. The concept of treasure was only then able to eke out a dreary existence on the fringes of both the capitalist and socialist imaginary, under the amazing and envy-arousing heading of the capitalist's or oligarch's private fortune. The last character mask of treasure was the deplorable Count of Monte Cristo, who as treasure finder was a figure from the past, but as avenger was entirely a man of the future. I will conclude these reflections by observing that in general economy, still longed for by contemporary thought, even after Bataille, and after the work of ecologists and deep ecologists, will not avoid returning to the much maligned concept of treasure. Of course, the right lessons must be drawn from alchemy's fate. It is no longer a matter of searching for the treasure function, the sudden and magical easing of life by fetishizing gold. Under present-day conditions, this would amount to the suggestion that we operate as counterfeiters, or try our luck in the casino and on the stock market. In light of historical experience, we must remain resolute in understanding that there would be no capitalism, no widespread affluence, no welfare state, and no trace of anything that constitutes the modus vivendi of the Western current system of comforts without the intervention of the most immense of all treasures, as we have already discussed. Yet the treasure assimilated by capitalism was found neither in pirates' chests nor in alchemists' cabinets. It was found in terrestrial real estate. This treasure, even if it is occasionally called quote-unquote black gold, is not part of the monetary aspect of the economic process, but belongs to labour. I am referring to the Marxist dual opposition of capital and labour. However, it also does not play any role in the ordinary concept of the labourer, since the latter is not a person, but the pure carrier of energy. The new concept of treasure to be incorporated into post-Marxist terminology thus requires an explicit concept that would allow us to express the fact that it belongs to the sphere of labour in an essentially different way than the former so-called proletariat, or some other form of wage dependency. active treasure, which is what we're here referring to, coal and petroleum, other forms of biosynthesis too later, embodies the principle of getting something for free in a typically modern way. This is because such a principle is suited for rapid combustion and for producing immediate effects, in stark contrast to its predecessor, the earth as bearer of slow growth. Active treasure is the actual agent of the principle of immediacy. The agent in question here, which can neither be capital nor labour, signifies nothing less than nature understood in post-conventional and post-metaphysical terms. And indeed, in its twofold differentiation as a source of fossil fuels and as laboratory for organic syntheses. Hence the name we are looking for can only be worker of nature. The anticipated global economy will only be able to be elaborated in the form of a tripolar theory that is applied to the juncture of labour, capital, and worker of nature. Since Nietzsche, and once again, since Bataille, we know that the sun has always played the role of the first profligate. For now it is the absolute embodiment of the virtue of generosity, which forms the absolute counter-principle to capitalism's principle of acquisition. A post-capitalist form of the world and a corresponding ethics can only proceed from a new interpretation of the sun. Of course, current capitalist intellectuals are clueless when it comes to an agent like the sun, because even after the ecological caesura, they're still completely in the habit of absolutising the interaction of capital and labour, and continue to ignore the contribution of the third side, that of the worker of nature. For the moment, let us content ourselves by concluding that the golden age of such ignorance is coming to an end. If the 20th century aimed to realise the dreams of the modern age, without having interpreted these dreams correctly, then we can say that the 21st century must begin with a new interpretation of dreams. Such interpretation will require examining how humanity pursues the treasure hunt that is the sine qua non for expressing what being in the world means for us.